The patch Supervive needed at launch is finally here, and I already pre-read this, so I'm going to give you a TLDR on most things as we read over it. Let's get started. The first thing they're adding is a time-limited revival change for pretty much the first day of combat. So for the first day, if you die, you will respawn on top of a living ally that you are spectating after a delay. This respawn timer increases every single time you use it, so you can't just abuse it by dying constantly and trying to take outnumbered fights or whatever. Once it hits day 2, you will go ahead and automatically respawn if you are dead. And then at this point, the regular respawn system will come back into place. So before this, you actually can't even use beacons. It's not until day 2 that we get beacons back in the game. So the only way to respawn is either going to be deathboxing, wisps, or the system. Now, this is going to be a temporary experiment that lasts for 3 days from the 18th to the 20th. And personally, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the way they're implementing this. I think it's a great way for them to show us that they're willing to try things, but also at the same time, if it's a system that doesn't work and a radical change like this one to bat, then if it sucks, they can just get rid of it and we don't have to worry about it for the rest of the patch. I'm a big fan of how they're doing this, and it shows us once again, they're committed to making the open beta feel more like a beta and trying these pretty drastic measures to try and get people to have a more enjoyable experience, especially in the early game where I think it needs the most cleaning up. So glad to see this. Next up, speaking about early game fighting, they have ascending armor now. So what this is as you deal damage to enemy hunters, so other players in the game, you knock them, you get assists or whatever, you're going to be progressing your actual armor. So you can go from gray armor all the way up to a new tier of red armor, actually, depending on your damage done. These damage thresholds are 2,000 for green, 5,000 for blue, 15,000 for gold, and 20,000 for red. I haven't seen how strong the red armor is yet. I'm actually recording this before I've gotten a chance to play the patch. So if you want to check me out live testing the patch, twitch.tv/Rhinne. I think I even have scrims today too, so you guys can go and watch us sweating in those. This will be interesting to see how it actually pans out. I do see this meaning that more players might start griefing or like chasing people during day 1. So this is a little bit worrying. I'm definitely going to have to test this to see how I feel about it. One good thing is though, you don't get the durability back when you level it up. So this makes the snowball effect from this not as powerful, as when you're in those early game fights, your armor is going to be ticking down. So you don't just get like a full gold armor, you get the gold armor at the durability of whatever you're at. So 30% or whatever after a fight. So you're going to have to use gold, aka resources, in order to get it back up. All right, ranked performance score. This is the part of the patch I was the most confused about, as in I didn't really know what it meant for the game. So we're pulling up a change we were originally planning for a ranked update in January, both in anticipation of our new revival rules, but also because we want to reduce ranked inflation that comes especially from bloody games. Previously, in addition to earning ranked points for placement, you also earn ranked points for all kills scored during the game. Now, in addition for gaining points for placement, you'll earn ranked points for final kills or team eliminations. Final kills. If you were the last team to kill a player before their team was eliminated, you'll gain +3 RP or +4 RP in duos. And team eliminations. If you kill the last player on a team and knock out that team from the game permanently, you'll gain +2 LP on top of the final team score. To earn final kill points, your team has to outlast the others. So for example, if your team kills 3 enemies and your team gets eliminated before them, you will not get the kill points for that team. You have to actually get a higher placement than them inside of the game. This is kind of a weird change, and as I mentioned before, I'm definitely going to test this to see how it feels, but it sounds like they don't want you just running around and farming the noobs and then getting points off of that. They want you to actually last long throughout the game and try to win every single game. So this may encourage more ratty behavior. This may encourage more controlled gameplay, especially inside of ranked, rather than running around and farming the noobs around the map to gain as much elo as possible. So it's probably a good thing in that sense, but also it seems kind of weird to have kills only really be impactful for the snowball effect. It's kind of weird that we have like a kill system that doesn't really give you anything unless you're the person to actually kill that player. I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially given there's so many revive mechanics inside of the game. What if you just like kill a team a bunch of times, but then they end up reviving and then another team wipes them out completely, and even though you've been destroying them the entire game, you get +0 LP off of that team. So this one seems a little bit worrying to me. I'm definitely going to have to test this and give my thoughts at a later time, but let me know what you guys think about this. So holiday progression and cosmetics. They're adding essentially more ways to get rewards inside of the game, right? They already talked about this earlier. They're giving you vibe points if you hit mastery level 6 on certain characters, right? Or on any character in the game. So if you hit mastery 6 on Void, you get 150 vibe points. You hit it on Myth, you get another 150, so that means 300 vibe points. And they're adding more things we can actually spend our vibe points on in a shop in the future. So they're going to add rare skins, gliders, wisps, and emotes that you can buy for vibe points. So that's kind of nice, having a incentive to get higher mastery on different characters, try out different characters, all that stuff, and then getting rewarded with in-game goodies. I love to see that. That's a good change. Oh, also, just because this is a beta doesn't mean you are not keeping your mastery level. So you can go ahead and level it up right now and just chill. So now we're talking about the balance changes. So they changed 3 characters, the first one being Void. They changed Void's LMB actually. The bloom on his LMB resets faster. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't even know what that means. I don't really play Void. But the next part, his unempowered shots no longer pierce terrain, but now are 35% longer. So before, Void players used to position behind walls and pierce it with their actual or with their autos, right? And there wasn't too much you could do about it because most characters can't actually hit over walls. So he would just sit behind walls and have like this little bit of gimmicky gameplay. But they're getting rid of that, and they're just making him straight up better inside of combat with a 950 range now on his auto attacks. This makes him better in straight up combat, which I think is one of the things Void was missing. A lot of his kit feels like it's mainly like gimmicks and like trying to outsbrain the opponent in order to get good positioning. And so this is probably a healthy change for Void. I think this is a good thing. I think this is a buff. And then Swap. They're lowering the cooldown of Swap, his shift, by 2 seconds. So this means every Void player on your team can now grief you 2 seconds faster. Obviously, a pretty big buff for him, especially since Void, one of the biggest things he's lacking is his mobility. And with this being so telegraphed, it's hard for him to move around the map, but a 2-second cooldown reduction is very, very noticeable. So big change for Void. He's getting a lot of love right here. And then his Q damage is getting increased by 10%. I feel like if you're hitting people with Q inside of your ult anyway, you're already one-tapping them, so this doesn't mean too much for that. I don't think this is going to change him too much. The other 2 changes are definitely more impactful. Ghost is getting a little bit of love as well. His unempowered LMB is getting a 20% damage increase, so if you're not landing your sticky bombs, then you just get a 20% damage buff to his auto attacks. Kind of nice. His sticky bomb is getting a 20% damage increase. I don't actually think it does too much damage right now. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I mean, another slight damage buff is nice, but a big change actually for the meta is that his arcane railgun, his Q, now deals explosive damage, meaning that it does bonus damage to Oath Shield. This means that one of the characters that walled Ghost out in meta, Oath, is now a lot worse against him. Now, Oath is still probably going to have a good matchup because he does have the healing, and a lot of what Ghost wants to do is poking people. But I like this change because it's indirectly nerfing Oath, and that character is very bonkers. So, you know what? Good change. Good change. For this next change, I main Myth, and let me just say, she did not need these buffs, alright? Her green LMB perfect shot damage is increased by 5%, and then blue LMB damage is increased by 10%. She did not need any buffs whatsoever. She was in a fine state, solid A-tier character, does everything in the game, has great range, has great carry potential, has good CC, has great escapability, has good zone control. She literally does everything great, right? Her auto attack is one of the best auto attacks in the game. She did not need any love. Very surprised to see them buffing her, and I would actually not be surprised if in the future Myths end up getting a nerf somewhere. I'll definitely be abusing this on stream, for sure. So Shiv is getting a little bit of a change to her skills, so I'm not sure what it was before, but her Chain Bolas now adds Malice stacks on all targets hit, so it combines them. So if you have, I'm assuming 2 on one and then 1 on another, both targets will be at 3. Interesting change. And then Far Step Dagger refreshes kick flips cooldown on enemy impact. So now she has another way to reset her left shift. Left shift already resets itself, and then her ult resets it, and then now her Q resets it. But her Q is a long cooldown and generally using it to run away or like throw it in a weird position rather than actually go in. So the way you would have to get value out of this is you would have to like Q someone and then like dash forward and hit them and then miss and then Q into them to reset kickflip or quick flip, I should say. I actually don't think that's that impactful. I could be wrong. I'm not a Shiv player, but it doesn't sound like that's that good of a change because a lot of the time you're using Q to just get like poke damage anyway, or you're not even hitting someone. You're just using it to go forward, right? Interesting changes. I guess Shiv mains will have to figure out whether or not these are good, but I can't really comment too much on that. Helix and Brawl. We're removing some boops on abilities that add a lot of movement corrections where if you have mid to high ping, aka me playing on 80 ping, you'd get hit by an ability and then micro teleported because your client predicted you'd be in one place and the server knows that you're actually 2 centimeters off of the mark, and then forcibly corrects you to that spot. I won't go further except to say the magical spirit of online netcode dislikes fast, tiny movement disagreements between 2 clients and a server, so we're remediating. So Felix's R&B no longer knocks back targets hit, and then Brawl's LMB no longer knocks back targets hit either. I actually almost feel like that might be a buff for Brawl, because a lot of the time when you're hitting targets, especially like range targets or whatever, right, you want to be in their face more than they want to be in your face. Now against melee targets, this is technically a nerf, but obviously they're not changing this to try and nerf or buff either of the characters, but I'm trying to think of like the actual effects inside of the game. When he's against melees, this is probably a nerf because he doesn't want to like really be in their face, but when he's against range characters, it's a buff. I don't know. It's not going to change anything about him. He's still going to be equally as viable as he was before. But it's an interesting change, and I'm a fan of it because I've definitely experienced those micro teleports before, once again playing on 80 pings. Good change. I'm glad to see games like this actually catering a little bit to higher ping players, as I'm used to just getting the short end of the stick just because I have high ping. I guess it sucks living in California. All right, game system changes. So they're nerfing stealth. Thank God. I would not mind them removing stealth from the game, honestly, but nerfs are a close second place. Increased inner and outer ring detection ranges for stealth. Volume brought up for enemy stealth sound effects, and then more changes are coming in a future patch. This is just the first step. So I like that last line especially, because even with this change, and it sounds like good changes so far, we'll have to see how they're implemented inside a game. I feel like stealth is still an extremely problematic mechanic inside of a battle royale. In a 2v2 scenario, or like I should say, when you're fighting another team, such as in League of Legends, right? And you're against just like another team, you can track all their movements well. And so stealth is much more balanced there. So something like a Twitch or an Evelyn is much easier to have counterplay against than it is when there's 10 teams inside of a map, 40 different players, and you have to keep track of stealth while also keeping track of the other 9 teams on the map. I think stealth is just inherently problematic in games like this, so that's why I'm personally for completely removing it, but if they're going to make more changes to it and keep nerfing it, that's probably the best way they can deal with it and still keep it in the game. We'll have to see what they end up cooking up in the future, but this is a good first step. Map pulses for audio. Audio scouting is obviously much harder to do in a top-down game than a full 3D shooter, so we're making a skill a little bit more accessible and equitable for all. So enemy combat actions and loud sounds now show up as pulses on your minimap and megamap. Footsteps do not. These pulses get less accurate the further away they are from your location. So things like Luna ults are gonna like, boom, like super pulse on the map, right? This is really good for new players because knowing how to use audio cues is not something that's intuitive to the game, right? Like you hear noises and like the top right or something, right? You might not even know they're coming from the top right or like what skills are being used. And now instead of having to know audio cues, that kind of a knowledge check essentially, you can just see the pulses on the minimap. And this also encourages new players to look at the minimap more. So this is a great change, I think, for getting new players closer to the level of the veteran players. Good change overall, and a buff to people who like playing with music on, such as myself. So I like this change. New players are probably going to have an easier time playing because of the change, and I guess this makes veterans relatively worse compared to the rest of the lobby, because they're the players who abuse audio cues, but they can get bent. Evil keys. So the Slayer keys and chests are just going to spawn less because they think that there's going to be more fighting in the early game. That's fine. I think there's currently too many exotic powers in the game, so I'm chill with this. Wisps. They're actually having the bleed out time of wisps. I kind of like this change for 2 reasons. 1, it's a brawl nerf, so we love that. And then 2, it makes it that way the gameplay of you down someone and then they just keep walking back slowly and you can't push into them because it's really hard to pressure into like a myth Zeph oath or whatever, right? They're gonna do so much damage to you as you're trying to run in to stop them from getting the wisp. It makes it so this gameplay is toned down a little bit. So I really like this. I think it's a good change for the game. You end up getting that first initial knock, and the enemy team either has to play extremely aggressively to get their wisp back, or the wisp just goes bye-bye, and you have to go look for a rest somewhere else. Good change. And they're adding 3 new powers. They don't describe what they do here, so I haven't played the game yet. I can't really speak too much about them, but Jelly Cube, Twister Best, and Pocket Geyser, look out for those in-game. Speaking of being in-game, I'm going to be live streaming the patch, testing out all the new stuff, as well as scrims, twitch.tv/Rhinne, and actually here on YouTube too, so make sure you subscribe, and until next time, take care.